And so it's kind of God's last words through this person Joshua, who's a prophet and a leader of this nation. And so, last words are always important, and we're going to talk about Jesus' last words as we end with this. But as you get into this, I just stole some stuff off the internet, and I couldn't help. I got to share it. Okay. Oscar Wilde, the playwright, here's how it was written on the internet. Once said on his deathbed. Well, pretty much what you say on your deathbed is about the only time you say it on your deathbed, right? Anyway, Oscar Wilde once said, "Either this wallpaper goes or I do." Woody Allen said, he's profound now, "I don't mind dying, I just don't want to be there when it happens." And the Mexican revolutionary Pancho Villa said, "Don't let it end like this. Please tell them I said something." As Joshua meets with these people, it's basically, you decide, you going to serve the Lord, or you going to serve other stuff that you made gods out of. And it's a call really to us all in many, many ways. Not really a Christmassy message. I'm going to do that next week and then on Christmas Eve. But this really, really kind of wraps up Joshua for us in a real good way. It starts out by talking about God being on our side. And it says that Joshua summoned all the tribes of Israel to Shechem, including their elders, their leaders, their judges, and officers. And so they came and presented themselves to God. Now, Shechem is actually a place of choice. It's a place of justice. Shechem is one of the 7 cities that were known as cities of refuge. So in ancient Israel, if you murdered somebody, they're going to stone you to death. But if you killed somebody by accident, their cousins might be coming after you, and you could go run to one of these cities, and they would hide you, they would protect you, and then they would hold a trial. And if they determined that you had actually murdered the person, well, now you're in trouble. But otherwise, they're going to offer you refuge. If somebody for the rest of your life is out to get you, they're going to always protect you. But it's a place of decision making. It's a place of choosing. And so it's a kind of an appropriate place for these people to come together. Verse 2, Joshua said to the people, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says." And he tells them, reminds them of their history. "Long ago, your ancestors, including Terah, the father of Abraham and Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates River, and they worshipped other gods." They actually lived in what is called Iraq today. "But I took your ancestor Abraham from the land beyond the Euphrates and led him into the land of Canaan, which we today call Israel. I gave him many descendants through his son Isaac. To Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau. To Esau I gave the mountains of Seir," Saudi Arabia, "while Jacob and his children went down into Egypt because there had been a famine and there was food in Egypt. And then after 400 years, it doesn't say it here, but we know from the rest of the Bible, God called the people out of Egypt to come back into the land that we know as Israel today. Verse 5 says, "I then sent Moses and Aaron and brought terrible plagues upon Egypt, and afterwards I brought you out as free people. But when your ancestors arrived at the Red Sea, the Egyptians chased after them with chariots and charioteers. When your ancestors cried to the Lord, I put darkness between you and the Egyptians. I brought the sea crashing down on the Egyptians, drowning them." And actually, modern science has figured out kind of how God did that. It's a pretty amazing thing. But I don't have time for that here today. It says, "I brought the sea crashing down on the Egyptians, drowning them. With your very own eyes, you saw what I did. And then you lived in the wilderness for many years." And while they were in the wilderness, they complained. God fed them supernaturally. They didn't like what he fed them. They said there's no water, but there were drinking water. Just like, Alex said, you can live for 3 days without water, so how can there be no water? And we're living. And so they were these whiny bag people. And yet God continued to bless them. Does anyone relate to that? It says, finally I brought you into the land of the Amorites on the east side of the Jordan. This would be what today is called the nation of Jordan, if you look at a map. They fought against you, but I destroyed them before you. I gave you victory over them, and you took possession of their land. Then Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, started a war against Israel. He summoned Balaam, the son of Beor, to curse you. But I would not listen to him. Instead, I made Balaam bless you, and so I rescued you from Balak. When you crossed the Jordan River and came to Jericho, the men of Jericho would be in what's called the West Bank today that the Palestinians and the Jews are fighting over. When you crossed the Jordan River, you came to Jericho. The men of Jericho fought against you, as did the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, Girgashites, the Hittites, the Jebusites, and all those other guys. But I gave you victory over them. And I sent terror ahead of you to drive out the two kings of the Amorites. And he says this, it was not your swords or your bows that brought you victory. I gave you land you hadn't worked on. I gave you towns you didn't build, the towns where you're now living. I gave you vineyards and olive groves for food, though you did not plant them. You know, you and I need to stop and think every so often about the things that God has done for us and how he brought us out of death and into life and he made things work for us. You know, I was watching a thing that my wife had seen on Netflix. I was gone for the last couple of weeks. I was in Atlanta. I'm working with a group of people that are wonderfully shaping the future of Christianity in America. And so I'm getting to be a part of that. I'm writing things for them and did some training things. They're actually writing college courses. They're going to be able to give a master's degree in church planting, believe it or not. And so it's pretty amazing that they last year assembled 9,000 church planters and then a whole bunch of other little things with several thousand more, maybe 3,000 more. And so it was a very interesting thing. But I came home and my wife had watched this thing on TV, and you should watch it if you have Netflix. And if you don't have Netflix, you're being a poor steward of God's money, and you should get it because for $8.99 a month, you can't believe what you're getting. It's the best bargain in the world, even better than Amazon. And it's kind of a documentary movie called Happy. The word is simply happy. And it talks about the science of happiness, how that 30 years ago, people would readily measure depression and anxiety, and they had tests for that. And they do EKGs on people and they can kind of look inside their brain if they're depressed and see that their brain is different than non-depressed people. But then some guy starts studying happiness and they go, he's a nutcake. Well, today there's a lot of nutcakes out there because there's a whole science of happiness. And so we got into this thing and we watched it, and it's very, very interesting. You know, people in Okinawa live longer than people anywhere in the world. They got so many people over 100 years old. People in Denmark are the happiest people on the planet, and they show a picture of a guy. You know those little things that doodads they put on you, like on your chest when they do an angiogram thing or EKG, or they can do it on your head. And this one guy got like 70 of these things on there, and so they can actually kind of read his brain. They can see inside his head and see his brain. And the Danes, people in Denmark, are the happiest people in the world. And they talked about contributing factors, that when you give to other people, give your money, give your resources, it makes you happier because you bless them. When you serve people, it makes you happy. If you're working at work that you enjoy, that makes you happy. And there's all these things that would be happy factors. And then they went to Japan, and they can measure this, that unhappiest people on the planet are the people in mainland Japan. And the reason is, a lot of it is just social pressure to conform. And then the other deal is they work in such long, long hours. And they started the Japan sequence with interviewing a widow of a man that was in his early 40s when he died from overwork, working 70, 80 hours a week, nonstop, no vacations, until it just took him out. Really sad. And then they interview this lady, because there are a number of people now who have PhDs in happiness. And they interview this woman, And she goes, well, here's one thing that you can do to now get this. To cause your brain to release different chemicals, one of them being dopamine, which is the same thing that happens when you're on Coke. And I don't mean the kind that comes in a can, right? Although it makes me pretty happy too. Anyhow, your brain will release these chemicals that wash your brain with these different things that make you happy. But then those chemicals actually cause neurological changes, physical changes to your brain. And they showed pictures of people who did this one thing, like before and after. Now, it's not like you do it once and it works, but over a period of time. And here's what it is. Count your blessings. And here's what the lady said. Every Sunday night at the same time, and by the way, it doesn't have to be Sunday, but pick a time, once a week, get a journal, piece of blank notebook, whatever, and write down a list of 5 things that you're thankful for that happened to you in the last 5 days, last 7 days. And it will physically change your brain and rewire it toward happiness, and it'll last for the rest of your life. You guys should pay me more. I mean, if you have ventured into pharmaceuticals that were the wrong kind, you spent a lot of money for that. I just gave you a key to happiness that can change your brain, and it'll do it for the rest of your life, and it somehow lines up with the Bible. That we are extolled to praise the Lord, to come into His presence with thanksgiving, to not worry and be anxious about anything, but instead, by prayer and supplication, mixed with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And now modern science is going, and it was so weird because they actually did a little sequence in there about church. And they said some people go to church and it makes them more happy because they serve others through their church, they give to their church, and it makes them happy. And then it still showed some cranky old preacher preaching, it's like they had to get their shot in. But there was something that was really valuable there that we should learn to. And I'm not a legalist. I'm not a rulesy kind of a guy, but I'm going to pick a time, and I'm going to go. I went to some thing I spoke at, and they were giving away these fancy leather-bound journals, and I just laying there. I'm going to start using that sucker. And I'm just going to, once a week, sit down and write down the things that I'm thankful for. I have another one where we used to do journals in our church, and I just went in the back of one and I wrote down all the times where God has done the massive miracles in my life, saved my life a couple times. And every so often, if I'm down, I go back and I read that. But to know that I can change my, not only brain chemistry, I can change the physiology of my brain by just simply doing what the Bible told me to do already. Not bad a deal. All right? I'm worth more than you pay me. Nah, I'm very well paid. I am very well. I'm just joking, okay? So, God's saying through Joshua, I did all this stuff for you. Be thankful. Xavier got up here today and talked about how God took us out of what He took us out of from death, and He brought us into life and made these incredible changes in our lives. And some of us came from some pretty bad slavery into a relationship with the Lord that can only be described as, I got set free from Egypt. And now I'm living in the land of Canaan. I'm in the place of blessing, and it's all God. And I just need to be thankful to Him. Are you with me? I need you to think about it this way. The Egyptians were enemies to the Israelis. They came out of the enemy camp into a place that was also filled with enemies. And at first, what they were was they were living as an outpost in enemy territory. And you know what? In many ways, that's kind of what we need to be thinking about ourselves. We live in a world that's foreign to us because we are now citizens of the kingdom of heaven. And we are operating an outpost in a foreign place. And in many situations, especially if you've been watching TV at all in the last 4 months, we're living in a society that's hostile to who we are. The Bible says that you are foreigners in a strange land. You are citizens of the kingdom of heaven. Amen. And so we're operating this outpost, and when we are venturing out and planting churches and doing the missions things that we do and whatever, we're skirmishing with the enemy. We're out there and we're releasing people that he's held captive. And that's a powerful thing. And you should probably expect to get shot at once in a while, because that happens too. So don't get all bummed out. Just go, well, it's to be expected, and God got me through it, and so I'm going for it. You there? Yeah. Well, then he goes on. In verse 14, he says, so fear the Lord and serve him wholeheartedly. Serve him wholeheartedly. Decide that you're going to do it, and do it with everything that's in you. You know, I was in Atlanta, I guess almost 2 weeks ago. I flew all night on Sunday to get there, and we did this thing, and then I went up to Nashville, and I did a whole bunch of different things. But last Monday, I was in Nashville all day with these pastors from all over the country, and they're trying to do this thing about just different, and we're going to play with it. I took some of the stuff we had a guy in the room who they introduced him as, he's got a PhD in statistics. And he goes, no, it's way more sophisticated than that. And then he described what his PhD is in. He also pastors like 4,000 people in Florida, and he's planted a whole bunch of churches. But he goes, this, and by the way, have multiplied churches. They've planted churches. They're one generation. They didn't go 2, 3, 4. But that's what we're there for, is to help them go the extra mile. But you've taken the Myers-Briggs test or the DISC test or some of those. This guy's certified to write these kind of tests, and so they're pumping out this kind of material. And so I'm in a room with all these people that are smarter than me and just amazing. One guy, he's a lot like us. They've planted a bunch of churches. Again, it's one generation out there. They haven't gone 2, 3, 4 generations, and he was a little mad about that, because we're talking so much about that really to be what you need to be thinking about take the gospel to the ends of the earth, and to just go across town isn't far enough, even if you planted a church. And they have a test that they've written that's designed to make you feel bad if you're a pastor who's trying to build a big church for the sake of being big, and it really is designed to create angst and frustration. And he had taken it the night before. And so we're there not to talk about that, but to talk about discipleship. But the people who were with the people who are responsible for this test, and he was just hacked off. He just, in a bad mood because he scored 3 out of 5. And so, you want me to tell you what the levels are? Okay. Level 1 church is struggling to survive. It can't pay its bills, it can't pay its pastor, whatever. Level 2 is a church that is, everything's comfortable financially, we're having a good time, and we plateaued, and we're happy, and we're going to heaven, and we don't really care about anybody else. Level 3 is, that is driven usually by a pastor who's got a very strong personality, and we're going to get big, and we are going to get as big as we can be big. And my books are going to sell 100,000 copies. Yeah, see the numbers on my books, you would laugh. But that's level 3, and so really, if you think about it, level 1 and 2 are usually wannabe level 3s. Level 4 is we've gone a step further and we're starting to plant some churches. Maybe they're extension campuses. I'm on video in 5 different places in Hawaii, and so we're doing something. That's good. Level 5 is we're planting churches, and we're training those guys to plant churches from there, and so are you with me?
Yes.
So here's a guy pastoring, and get this, 6,500 people in a town of 18,000. And he's level 3. And he's mad at the test. It's like, I'm not level 3. You know, we're doing stuff overseas. We have, we do missions teams. And he was just, I'm saying all that just to set the stage. So he comes in, he's ticked off. So in the middle of it, he gets mad at me. And he goes, you're telling me that I got to go out and do what that guy over there, to give away our best leaders and give away money and all that, and doesn't want to do it. And so we went through that. And then he popped off again about something that had nothing to do with anything, but it has a lot to do with this sermon. He has a guy in his church that's really involved teaching the Bible with another group that's really into doing Bible studies. And it's a national group. And this guy, every Monday night, is doing his thing for several hours, very dedicated, very solid Christian, been a member of this church for a long time, refuses to do any ministry in his own church. Now, I want you to know that I think that's okay. You're going to go out there and do something for the Lord? Well, that's what we're here for. We equip you to do the work of the ministry. Go for it. You with me? And if you're too busy with your job, your family, and doing that to do stuff in the church, I'm happy. And that pastor should be too. And I think you would be. But there's a problem. That pastor, like me, does he teaches through the Bible, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, whatever. But the guy has been hammering him for 5.5 years. This church needs more Bible studies. There's a little problem. Because the pastor says, okay, I agree, come and teach a Bible study. And you can teach a Bible study here, and you can do your other thing there, and I'm fine with that, and I would be fine with that. But don't throw rocks if you're not willing to get busy and do something. Their church is doing fine. They're not doing fine. They're level 3. They need to get to level 5. But they're doing fine in terms of Bible study. That guy has no right to be throwing bricks through anybody's window. Am I making sense? Yes. And so the pastor in the middle, and it's weird how this all happened. He's spouting off about, what he's mad about taking the test and getting a 3, and suddenly he's erupting about this other guy, and he gets embarrassed. And he goes, I know I probably blew it, and, guys, he's pastoring all these people, and he's also a high school wrestling coach, and his kids are winning state championships, so he's kind of competitive. And so then he goes off and he goes, I shouldn't have gotten mad at the guy, and I'm going to meet with him tomorrow for lunch and everything. And I go, hey, Jim, I want you to know something. I'm glad that you did because he had really popped the guy one. And I go, I'm really glad that you did that because it makes me feel better about me. And I go, and second, I got to correct you. Because if I was meeting with that guy tomorrow, then by tomorrow afternoon, he would have decided whether he's going to stay in our church, keep his mouth shut, stay in our church, ante up and do something, or just go someplace else. 3 choices, you choose, you decide, but you decide now. And he kind of took him back. Well, that's what's going on right here. God is saying, through Joshua, you choose. You get serious or you get out. Hard words. Hard words. And it says this, fear the Lord and serve Him, what's it say? Wholeheartedly. That means with everything you got. Put away forever the idols that your ancestors worshipped when they lived beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt. You know what that says? That says that these people have been dragging around idols for over 470 or 440 years. Somebody snuck some of those little statues in the tent and been keeping them with them. And that's a bad thing. And they probably picked up a few more in Egypt. And probably as they conquered some of these towns, they smuggled in a few of those things. And so they're going, oh, we love the Lord. But we're counting on this thing too. We got our lucky charm over here. We got our amulet. We got, we were watching a TV show the other night and they were kissing the Blarney Stone. Have you heard about that thing in Ireland? You don't know what it is. You think it's a rock someplace, and some of you guys were all going to England and Ireland this year, and you think you're going to kiss them. No, you're not. You have to hike up a castle 120 some odd steps, and there's a stone that some witch hundreds of years ago said is a blessed stone, and then you got to lean over backwards to where people have to hold your feet to keep you from falling. Although they welded some iron rods into there. And there's this stone up underneath this battlement of this castle, and you lean under there and you kiss it, and it gives you good luck for the rest of your life. Serve the Lord wholeheartedly and get rid of all that garbage in your life. But if you refuse to serve the Lord, then you choose today who you'll serve. See, the guy that I told you about, the pastor, either stay in the church, do your thing, and shut up, or stay in the church, do your thing, do our thing, or you could probably even quit the other thing and stay in the church, or go someplace else. But you choose. And so it's down to this. He says, if you refuse to serve the Lord, then choose today whom you will serve. Would you prefer the gods of your ancestors that they served beyond the Euphrates? Or will it be the gods of the Amorites, who you just defeated, in whose land you now live? But as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. So you've already decided, most everyone in this room, where you're going to spend eternity. The question is, how are you going to spend the life that leads into eternity? The number of years that you have left. Am I making sense? I think about dying. I just turned 71, and I think about that. And Harold got up here and preached a few weeks ago, and poor Harold. The doctor told him that he cannot expect to live for more than 20 years. Actually, with a straight face, he told an 82-year-old man, Harold, he wasn't kidding. You can't, Harold walks 5 miles a day. But you can't expect to live for more than 20 years. Well, I looked at some insurance tables and stuff like that, and they're saying somebody my age can only expect to live for 29 years. Well, think about this for a second. And that you should make sure that your finances are going to last for 29 years. So I got 29 years left, and the only thing that bums me out about the whole deal, because I get to go to heaven, I got a ticket. The only thing that bums me out about it is I love that woman over there. And at some point, this romance, don't do that. This romance is going to be over. And I don't like that. Other than that, I'm happy. But I have chosen that I'm going to serve the Lord. And I know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do in eternity, but I know what I'm going to do between now and then. And it's all good. It's all good. And Joshua, God, actually, through Joshua, is bringing these people, and I hope I'm bringing you, to a point you're going, okay, I'm deciding. I was talking to a guy this morning in church, and he's an old coot. He's actually older than me. And he's in very good shape physically, and he's into a certain sport, and he injured himself. He's healthy. He does a lot of stuff, and he just recently injured himself. And he said the Lord spoke to him. He's crying to the Lord, fix me up, fix my arms, fix my shoulders. And the Lord spoke to him and said, I didn't give you your health so you could do this. I gave you your health so you could do things that serve me. Doesn't mean you can't do the sport. It means this, that the sport can't be more important than doing the things of God. We're trying to do, when I just came back from a thing, and what I'm going to get into in early January, about where are you in terms of levels of growth in Christianity. Level 1 being, I just accepted the Lord, I come to church sometimes, but golf is really important. And level 2, it goes on up from there. And so it's going, hey man, decide. Choose. Make a decision. Because this way you live your life, I mean, you may already have your ticket. You probably do. But there's other people who aren't going to get one because you didn't live your life for the Lord. They're not going to make it to heaven. And that makes it important. Are we getting anywhere? Verse 16, the people replied, we would never abandon the Lord and serve other gods. For the Lord, our God, is the one who rescued us and our ancestors from slavery in the land of Egypt. He performed mighty miracles before our very eyes. As we traveled through the wilderness among our enemies, he preserved us. It was the Lord who drove out the Amorites, the other nations living here in the land. So we too will serve the Lord, for he alone is our God. And then Joshua, in the only point that I see reverse psychology in the whole Bible, goes, nah. Loosely translated. Joshua warned the people, you're not able to serve the Lord. He's holy and jealous. He will not forgive your rebellion and your sins. If you abandon the Lord and serve other gods, he'll turn against you and destroy you, even though he has been so good to you. And you know what the people say? No, we will too serve the Lord. It says so right here in my Bible. He set them up. Perfect. You can't do this. But we can't do. So we go off from there. And then he says this, I got you. He says, you are a witness to your own decision. You have chosen to serve the Lord. Yes, they said, we are witnesses to what we have said. All right then, destroy the idols among you and turn your hearts to the Lord, the God of Israel. And so my question to you would be, what are the idols among you? You know what? We could make an idol out of our mission team going to Kenya every year. I'm getting to be fair at writing books. They're never going to sell a whole bunch, but I know that I'm helping people, but there is a part of me where pride wants to come up. Ooh, nasty. And all of a sudden, it becomes a god. Surfing can be a god. I can remember back in California when I lived back there and was young and healthy, and there'd be days I'd go, I don't want to go to work. I just want to do this. That movie I talked about, Happy, there was some guy in Brazil, and he's old coot, and he surfs every day, and then they showed where he lives. It's a shambles, and he's going, but I live the good life, and I catch the waves. Well, that's fine. That's fine, as long as God's more important. So we have to choose. At any time we make something more important than God, whether it's clubbing or golfing or fishing or cooking or whatever, then we made a god out of it, and we're in sin. It's wrong. Verse 24, the people said to Joshua, we will serve the Lord our God, we will obey him alone. And so Joshua made a covenant with the people that day at Shechem, committing them to follow the decrees and the regulations of the Lord. Is this good? Yes. Are you there? Yes. Okay, so here's two more scriptures. First one is Jesus' last words on the cross. And they're words of complete surrender. And he says, Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands. That's something we should be able to say every day. Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands. Father, I entrust my life into your hands. Father, I entrust my time into your hands. Father, I entrust my money to your hands. Father, I entrust my abilities into your hands. I've just given it to you. Surrender. And then the flip side of the record is this: complete authority. Complete submission, complete authority. Jesus' last words after the resurrection are these: I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations. You know, I've been talking about this level 1, 2, 3 church thingy. Okay, if you're at level 3, he ain't exactly going to reach the nations. That's why level 3 isn't as good as level 5. And people ought to feel frustrated. That's why I ought to feel frustrated, because my wife knows our neighbors better than I do. Because go might mean go next door. It might mean go down the hall. It might mean go to Japan. It might mean go surfing with your beer drinking friends and just go hang out during Pauhana. It might mean anything, but it means go. Pretty simple. We don't need Bill Clinton to tell us what, remember when he described, depending on what the meaning of the word is? It just means go. And if you're not going, then you're staying. I mean, the interesting thing is, in Acts chapter 8, you read the apostles. The word means sent out ones. All except the apostles fled when Saul of Tarsus started persecuting the church. And everywhere they went preaching the gospel. The sent ones stayed. They disobeyed the Lord. But here, Jesus says, I have all authority. And I'm telling you, go. And then it says to do 2 things. Make disciples. And then it says to baptize those disciples. And we know from reading the book of Acts that they ended up forming churches out of those disciples. But I want you to catch the order here. It starts with go, it moves to making disciples, and it ends up with baptizing them. Baptism, biblically, we don't quite measure up to this. Baptism biblically is the way that you say, hey, I've become a Christian. That you don't see yourself as a Christian until you're baptized. There's one woman in this church that in her heart had accepted the Lord and came to me and said, I want to be baptized. I want to accept Jesus. She already, and she'd prayed in her heart, but she got it in a way that most of us don't get it. So go, make disciples, and then baptize. This woman that I'm talking about, her husband and her daughter, who is in our children's church next door, had been discipling her before she ever came to accept the Lord. Does that make sense? That's the biblical pattern. I have talked about this over and over again, but when my wife and I were very young, married 2 years, her 14-year-old brother got in a little trouble with the law, and they took him away from his mother, and he came to live with us, and I didn't know what to do with him. I was a wreck in terms of, I wanted out of it, to be honest. And a 16-year-old kid in our youth group, that was the gawkiest, goofiest kid you ever met in your life, began discipling him before he ever accepted Jesus. And you know what that means? It starts out with befriending, then it goes to hanging out, then it goes to finding ways of letting them know that you are a believer in Jesus. And then it means living your life in front of them so that they go, well, why are you doing that? It isn't about Bible thumping. It isn't about preaching. It isn't about taking weird political positions and ramming them down other people's throats. It's about going out and sharing life with individuals in a way that you say, hey, come with me. Come with me. Maybe you bring them to church. Maybe you send them to somebody else's church. It's about bringing them to know Jesus. Are you with me? Okay. Choose this day who you will. What's it say? Serve. 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 It's not just follow. Serve. Jesus said, follow me, but then what did he say? I'll make you fishers of men. Same thing. And so there comes a point where you fish or cut bait. You're either in or you're not. I was watching something the other day, and it was actually a conversation. Somebody said, what you're saying is like, are you partially pregnant? You either are or you aren't. Are you serving the Lord? You either are or you aren't. And here's the part that troubles me as a pastor. Makes me have sometimes doubts about me. It doesn't say, choose today to serve the Lord inside of Hope Chapel. Okay, I think most of what we're supposed to do in serving the Lord is supposed to be out there. Let's go back to the story of the guy that got all hot under the collar about the guy doing the Bible study thing out there. That guy should be doing that thing out there. That's his thing to do. That doesn't mean, oh, you need to go out and run a Bible study. But that pastor should never interfere with it. The problem wasn't that the guy's doing something out there. That's to be commended. The problem was that he's bellyaching about the church that he attends. That's to be stopped. But we all need, see, for me it's like Brad and Andrea. It's Jim and Janine. They live on both sides of me. Go. About 30 feet. Go. You with me? We're going to do this a little different today as we end the service. I'm pretty sure that just about everybody in this room has already come to know the Lord. And so I don't even want to go in that direction. I just want us to pray a prayer of commitment to the Lord. But before we do that, I'm just going to shut up for a couple of minutes here. And I want you to just stop and pray quietly and go, Lord, show me where I'm supposed to go. And then we'll close it. Lord, thank you for speaking to each of us in that still small voice in our heart. And we would say, along with those people from ancient days, we will serve the Lord. We will serve you. We commit ourselves. We are witnesses of our own decision. We will serve you. In Jesus' name we offer this prayer. Amen. God bless y'all.